Well, let's make this character with block surfaces. Let's use a few tools to look at the basics of block surface. I'll leave this scene in the addons downloads, in case you want to practice with it. References are grease pencil objects. You can change the opacity of the references here if you have the block surfaces references tool addon. Or if not, simply, by selecting the grease pencil object and in the opacity option you can manually change the opacity of each one. If you have the add-on you can change the opacity of the two references at the same time. Okay, let's lock it so we can't select the references while we work. We could also do it here in the collections if we don't have the block surfaces references add-on. Let's look at the basics we need to know about Blocksurfaces to create a character like this. We initialize the block surface addon. Whenever I worked with block surface, I would activate this option. You can see and understand more why in the complete manual video that you have on the channel. But it is basically to avoid conflicts that the names of the objects already exist when creating new branches. And then, I would have these options transformation of orientations into local and individual origins, so that, when I create the objects and transform them, they are transformed on their own axis. Well, let's start. Let's create a first object. I always start with the cube as you see in the videos. I add the modifier with 2 subdivisions and apply it to it. This is what I always do in videos. As I have a keyboard shortcut assigned, you'll see it faster. In the end it is just that. Subdivision modifier and apply. With this object selected, press Ctrl N to create a new branch with the selected object. We put a name for the character and the branch. And we already have the first object in the branch created. There it is in that collection. Then we'll adjust the object in the different views. With the E key we extrude the branch which actually duplicates the active object. Now, we simply position, rotate, and scale the objects as we want so that they fit in the different views. And in this way it is very easy to get to the forms of the character that we want. With the shortcut V we can see that we have those objects that are the ones that we have been creating and this is the final object that is generated for us, it is that. That is the generated object. Okay, we adjust on the different axes, and we already have that part for the torso. There are times when references from one view or others do not quite add up. So, there are some decisions to be made about how it looks best. Okay, we'd have it by now. Before, we created a new branch from an object, now, we can create it by having selected an object from another branch to create a new one. So, with Ctrl+N we have created the new branch for the neck. So, you can see, it's basically always the same operation, extrude with the keyboard shortcut E, and adapt the objects to the references in the different views. We're going to adjust the objects in the different views. And we have the possibility to modify these objects with sculpture mode or with edit mode. With total freedom to make the object fit better with the shape of the reference. And Blocksurfaces, simply, will adapt the final shape of the generated model with all the objects that make up the branch. Repeat, extrude with the E key, and as always we are adjusting the shapes. You will see in the videos that I usually do this part like this, to get the shape of the head better, to have depth where to place the eyes. And for the moment we leave it like that in this view. We are going to adapt it to the other views. Little by little we are going to continue creating fitting to the concept. Again selecting the branch object as we have done before, Ctrl N again and create a new branch. The parts that are not seen, when we superimpose objects, keep in mind that a mesh will be made with a volume that encompasses everything, a remesh that will join everything without making interior parts. We'll edit this with the usual Blender options. You know, we can work the objects in mesh or sculpture mode. We're going to use the sculpture a little bit to modify it and make it fit the shape we want. And we continue, focusing on each object, we modify them, bringing their shape closer to the reference and so on for each part that marks us a little the main shapes of the character. So, let's select this object to create a new branch for the arm. Here, as you can see, this highlighted object, by default in the addon options is marked like this. This is a markup, which simply tells us which object is the parent of all the objects in the branch. This object is what moves all the others. I will explain this better later. But, you can know that branches have hierarchy among the objects that compose them. When creating the objects, the first one is the parent of the next, this one is the parent of the following, and so on. So, here we have the option to show or hide this reference. Enable or disable the branch parent object indicator. If it bothers us, we hide it. We can also see or not the interior objects of the branch with this option. If we want to work like this, even though it's a little bit dirtier, harder to see the shapes, and again, Ctrl N to create new branch by the arm. As always, we are adjusting. Again, adjusting the sizes, the shapes, in one view or another. Then we'll reposition that. Let's hide the objects inside again, so we work in a slightly cleaner, more comfortable way, for me, and as always adjusting everything to the changes in the shapes of the concept. So I just have to make the objects fit the concept in each part and that's how we get to create the shape of the character. Let's adjust the arm a little bit. As we had seen we had the father here, they all have hierarchy. We can use this to handle the objects in the branch as if the branch were articulated. This will help me to make it very easy to adapt to the shape I want. With this it would be very easy to test if something works or not, if it has long arms, test proportions, test designs. We use the sculpture again to adjust the shapes to the concept we have. Use the keyboard shortcut V to work by seeing only the interior objects, and so, notice, we can see the objects that make up the arm, as you can see they are all very simple and easy to get. The final mesh of the branch will adapt to those basic shapes. The final mesh, it is updated when we finish modifying that object, when we make the change to another object. We continue with our arms. Now let's go with the hand part. And well, we're going to make it as you always see in the videos. Let's fix this in Edit Mesh mode. So it looks a little better, okay? And now again, I'm going to create a new branch from a selected object from another branch. To create the branch of a finger. I already have the new branch, I adapt the scale of the object as I want. And we create the objects for the finger, as they already have hierarchy we can move it. Now, we're just going to reposition it. We can use the option to view the parent object to make it easier to select this object from here. If not, it may be a little difficult for us to see it or select it. For that, we can activate this option here, and so I select it easily. When we have a branch that we want to duplicate, with the shortcut Ctrl+Alt+D, we get a new branch just like it. And so, we just have to reposition the new finger. We duplicate the fingers like this, and the last finger we duplicate it equally. We reposition as always. We're going to give them this curvature that has the position of the fingers on the hand. And now we duplicate to make the thumb. For the thumb we will delete the last object from the branch. Well, we already see this option, in which we see that we can delete an object or the entire branch. We are going to adapt the position of the finger a little more to the concept, more or less, there it can be okay, and we already have the hand created. Okay, let's continue with the character, and in the same way, let's create the legs. Then, once again, we create the new branch with a trunk object selected Ctrl+N and extrude with the shortcut E and go looking for the shapes of the different views. Looking for the shapes of the concept, and it is also good to put an object where the articulation can be, because, if we then want to make the character posable, we need it to have an object from which to rotate that articulation. We adjust it as we want, reposition, and as always, we edit the objects in Mesh Edit mode or Sculpt mode to better adapt it to the shapes we are looking for, as we have seen before. As you can see, they are repeated operations, very simple, and with that we can get many parts of the character. We reposition the object a little that could be the knee in case we then use it to pose the character. We continue to adjust the shapes a little to adapt them to the concept. With the shortcut V to visualize the final mesh or not, we can show it or hide it. To work better at all times, here I am going to modify this object a little. Again, we created a new branch for the Ctrl+N foot. We are creating and adapting the shapes. I will put an albedo here to serve as an ankle joint. Adjusting this one more, and I'm also going to edit it like this to make it serve us to give the shape of the shoe. Add to your mesh, sculpt, we have freedom, and then just the final mesh will adapt to the volume. So you can see that it is always practically the same. In each view, adapt the eyelets with small modifications for the shape we were looking for. We would already have 1 foot. We're going to make it a little bit wider from here. So now we're going to do. Well, now we're going to do the horns part. We're going to take an object from a branch, Ctrl-N, to make a new branch. We position it in its place. And we follow the shapes, as always. We can select several objects from the branch and move them all together, thus adapting a little to the other shape in the different views. Again, we're going to create another new branch to make the nose. Over here, we'll use it to define the shape of the forehead a little bit as well. And from here we extrude a new object, and we're going to narrow it a little bit and adapt it to the shape of the nose. We always check the different views. In the end, it doesn't matter how many objects we create, the end result will be the volume they form from one object to the next. And this allows us to edit however we want the objects. Here we're going to smooth this out a little bit. You know, we can select the object that we want to create a new branch for the ear in this case. Once again we adapt the object with simple operations, and shortcut E to extrude, even though you already know that it actually duplicates the selected object, thus extruding the branch. Looking for the shapes that adapt to the concept, we have the basic shape for the ear. Let's now create the eyes. Let's look at a new option to not always repeat the same thing. If we don't have anything selected, the keyboard shortcut K, create a sphere object. We position him. Now I'm going to duplicate it, Ctrl plus Alt plus D, and I'm going to use it eyelids. I'm going to edit, delete this part, and so we have here what would be the upper eyelid. And duplicate it to create the lower eyelid. And we duplicate once again, to make what would be the part of the iris and pupil. Well, I have the snap activated. When using the K shortcut is activated, I'm going to disable it. Here we can change the color to see it better. As all parts of the eye have the same material, it is changed in all objects. We're going to create new material for this branch. And now if it changes only its color. Now, instead of creating material for these branches, I'm going to copy the material that has the branch from the active object. Well, we already have the part of one side. Let's make him a fawn here as well. So, as I said, we can create a new branch from a selected object. Or if we don't have any selected, we can create it. With the keyboard shortcut K, it creates the object this. Which by default is the sphere, is really a subdivided cube. Remember that when we do the K shortcut to create the new branch, the snap is activated, we deactivate it to continue. And we're going to create the shape for the tusk. It's always the same, extrude, reposition, very little to change, and as you can see, with a few basic objects and block surfaces, we can do almost anything. Here I'm going to change this shape a little bit so that I encompass this a little bit more, like this, okay, and we already have the fawn well placed. As we saw before, we can change the color of the material for the branch here. Let's give it a somewhat more appropriate color. Well, we already have a side of the character, which, as we have already seen, in the end is Ctrl-N to create branch, shortcut E to extrude, and basic Blender operations such as repositioning, scaling, and very few other options to have this version of the character. Now let's see how we can make the symmetry of the parts that we already have on one side, and replicate them on the other. Okay, as we saw, each branch is independent. Here we can see which is the father of each branch. This one is from this one, if I select here. If I select here. This is the father of this branch. If I select here, I'm going to select this one. If I select the arm, here we have the parent of each branch. Let's hide the references now to see better. Okay, so, from each branch, we have the parent object, which is the one that the rest of the objects in its branch follow. This, which allows us, with this hierarchy in the branches. We can use these hierarchies that the branches have to adjust them, change proportions, pose the character, etc. Now, let's see how we can relate the branches to each other. With hierarchy between the branches as well as between their objects, we can make the rest of the branches move when moving the trunk or move the fingers when moving the arm. Let's see first that we have the option to move with which selected object we have on the branch. We can go through the branch with the up arrow and down arrow keyboard shortcuts. Thus, we move through the objects of the branch. Well, now, let's make the hierarchy between some branches and others. We will make the first object of a branch the parent of the rest of the objects of that branch. He who moves all is the son of another branch, so the whole branch will follow the rest, as when moving the trunk the leg will follow. Then, with the shortcut go up and down, we can reach a hidden object to select it, and I will choose the object of the trunk as an active, that is the one I want the father to be. And with this keyboard shortcut, we make the selected objects children of the active object. So we have that the first object of the leg, the father of the rest of the objects of the leg, follows the object we assign as the parent of that branch. We're going to do the same with this branch. I would go to the first object of the branch, the father, who is the one who moves everything, and with this selected, I select the one who is going to be the father. Here I have the two selected. And the active will be the parent of the next branch. Well, let's see it by separating them. I have this one as a selected object, and this as an active object when I press the shortcut. So, when I do the matching here, using the keyboard shortcut, we can already move the foot with the rest of the branch. So, all the objects that we have as selected, are going to be children of the active object. For example, in the hand it could be a case in which we would select several to be children of the active. We return the object to its place. I just moved it so that it could be seen that it was selected. It is not necessary to displace for that, and so, we would already have the whole leg ready to move, articulate, and it is attached to the trunk. So, we have seen that we would move to the initial object, the parent of the branch, and this make it the child of the active object, okay? But, we have an option here, this one from Smart Parent, which, what it allows us, is not to have to go to that parent object. If I have this option activated, selecting any object in the branch, and selecting as active the one that is going to be the parent of the other branch, when I click OK, when I press the keyboard shortcut. With this Smart Parent option activated, it will search for the parent of the branch of the selected objects and make it the child of the active at that moment. We also have the shortcut to remove the parent for the branch, with the keyboard shortcut. We took away his father. Remember that all these shortcuts can be changed in the addon's preferences. We return the branch to its position. Now we can select any object in the branch, and select the active one to be the parent. Since we have Smart Parent active, when we use the shortcut, the parent of that branch arm is already the child of the trunk, since, when we move the trunk, we move the branch of the arm with the. Then, we'll use this to make the fingers children of the hand. With Smart Parent activated, the addon will be in charge of looking for the parent of each branch and making it the child of this object that we leave as active. So, when I use the shortcut to relate the branches, I already have the articulated hand, so, we already have a hand that we can adjust to the concept. Or use this to change proportions, pose, etc. So, let's do the same with the head branch. It doesn't matter which object we select, when we have Smart Parent activated, that branch is going to become the daughter of the object that we have as active. We do it again. The idea of the shortcut, by using arrows to move through the branches, using Ctrl plus Alt plus Shift plus Left, became close and fast. With the new Smart Parent, perhaps, now this shortcut does not make so much sense. But we can change all the keyboard shortcuts in the addon preferences. So, we already have all that part that accompanies the torso. Already, from the trunk, all this is accompanying him in his movements. Now we're going to make this part of the nose. Likewise, with whichever we select, this branch, we'll make it daughter of the skull. We use the shortcut to make that branch of the skull daughter. And we already have that related part. Again, now the jaw, and we already have all these related parts. Now, let's see how to make symmetries for branches. We have two types of symmetry. We have the options in this panel here. And we have two options to make symmetries. With these here, we will see how to do them and what type of symmetry is for each occasion. Before we do the symmetry, let's adjust this a little bit more, to make a little bit more natural shape for the leg starting from the knee. So, now, we're going to do the symmetry for all the branches that we select, and we have two options to do this. With Mirror Branch, we're going to create symmetry for the branches we need, this case for the x-axis with this option. Mirror Branch is the first of the two options we have to mirror branches. With this option we create new branches for the other axis. This creates new branches on the other selected axis, x-axis, and the new branches will be mirrored. Here are the new branches on the x-axis, and we've duplicated the branches with their hierarchies. The new branches maintain the hierarchy thanks to having the parent option active when we made the mirror mesh. Let's now see what would happen if I did the arm symmetry without having the parental option activated. If I don't turn this option on. Duplicate objects, on the other side, will not maintain the hierarchies. I would have to reassign father for all fingers of the hand. Again, we would select the objects from the branches, and assign the active object as the parent with the keyboard shortcut. So, with this parental option activated, we would have already had that relationship made on the other side. Let's now make the symmetry for the branches of the eye. We will make the eyelids and pupil daughters of this, so we can move the eye. And again, we're going to select everything that we want to duplicate and we're going to use the mirror branch, with the parent turned on, so that you maintain branch hierarchies on the x-axis. Thus, this eye maintains the hierarchies with the other branches. We haven't attached these by their heads yet. So we're going to do it. And so we already have our eyes following the rest of the head. Okay, so far, we've been using the mirror type, mirror branch, which duplicates, creates new branches on the other axis. This type of mirror, we'll use it when we want branches on the other side that can be independent of the other. For example, to pose, or if we have different proportions on one side or the other, this will allow us to make different sides by reusing the branches created for the other side. Now, when the parts are going to be the same always in the other LOD, they won't change, we'll use mirror mesh. Mirror mesh simply adds the mirror switch to the final mesh of the branch. We would select some object from the branch we want to make mirror. Let's make this a little bigger. So, we would select the target option for the mirror modifier. And we could also make this active object the parent of the branch we mirror, all at once. I will no longer have to do the matching manually. So, we mirror on the x-axis, and so we already have the symmetry on the other side. In this case, we don't have objects on the other side, because they're going to be in only one part, because all we've done is add a mirror modifier to the final object. So, this Fong, we're going to do mirror mesh, to have the symmetry and follow the jaw part. We would do the same thing, the target is going to be the active and the parent is going to be the active. We would do the same, the mirror of the selected branch will target the active object and the active object will assign as a parent for the Fong branch. We mirror on the x-axis, and we already have it. So that part follows us. And in the ear we would do the same. We would select any object from the ear. We would select the target, in this case the skull, and both for the target of the mirror modifier of the ear, and to be the father of the ear, it will be that object of the skull that we have active. Now, we have the whole character with its symmetries. We have the mirrors, but we still have some things to relate. For branches, which we did mirror branch, we have to do the matching manually. When we do the mirror branch, we select the objects of these branches, so on these branches the hierarchy that we had when having the parent option activated has been maintained, but, now, we have to relate them to the ones we did not have selected. Then, as always, either we go to the object we want the child to be and select as active the one that will be the parent. Or, as we have the Smart Parent option activated, we can select any object from the branch that will be the child of the active object. So, for the leg we can do the same. Any object we select will help the addon to know which branch is going to be the child of the object that is active, because we are using the Smart Parent. So, now, we have all the parent's age with its hierarchies and with the possibility of posing it. This option to make the branches children of others is optional, it is just an easy and quick way to be able to test the character later with poses, or use it to adjust proportions. And try different designs etc. And no rig required, with a couple of functions and keyboard shortcuts. Also, as we already know, we can edit the objects. We can also easily change the proportions, volumes, of objects and thus easily change their entire appearance. Well, since we have the character, let's try to create a pose. Okay, well, let's try to make a pose. First, we're going to select all the objects and with the I shortcut, create the key on the timeline with the base position. To have this rest pose stored, and then, we'll go to another time on the timeline to create the new pose. And we begin to pose it, as the branches are articulated and are related to each other. Easily, we can pose the character. You can see that we have not needed any rig or complicated operations, just like that. Now we have the character ready. Try proportions, do some pose to continue sculpting, etc. We have to keep in mind that the rotations will go where we want. It is not a rig that has restrictions for each joint. So we could take any object anywhere. It can be fun. In the end, it is the possibility it gives us to test it, to change proportions, of many things without the complications of a rig. When we have the pose, we select all the objects again, and with the shortcut I, we create again the animation key for location, rotation, and scale, and thus save that pose. And a little animation to have a little fun. Well, it's time to create the final mesh. We will apply a remesh, and so we will have the model ready to continue with our usual workflow, detailing with sculpture or retopology, etc. Depending on our workflow and for which we are going to use the model. In the Generate Block Surfaces panel, we have these options. This first part is in case we want to subdivide a little more before generating the final mesh, smooth the model a little more. Now we have that subdivision into the branch objects. And this will mark the final shape, so, with these options, we can easily add subdivisions to individual objects or to all of the branches of the branch. If I have this option checked, it will only add subdivision to the selected object. If I remove this option, it will add the subdivisions to all objects in the selected branch. Then the resulting final mesh will be smoother, and we will have worked with less heavy objects during blocking. So, we can give a quick review of which parts, and see which ones need to be subdivided or which ones will easily smooth out later with the sculpture. We apply the modifier. We're not going to add any more now. And then we would have the process of generating the final mesh, which has these 4 steps, plus an intermediate one that's optional, okay? So, first step, prepare block surfaces objects. In the second step, we would generate the block surface meshes. The next step is optional. Here we could join the generated objects, or have the meshes separately. Let's put them all together into one final object. In the third step we set a value for the size of the voxel. When doing the remesh, we can test until we are satisfied with the result. Now we're going to try a 0.003 for the size of the voxel, okay, sort of, or we can give a slightly smaller size still to keep more detail. Let's try a 0.002, it depends on the size of your scene. And in the fourth step we apply the remesh and we have the model ready to continue with our workflow, with sculpture, or whatever we want. And now we have the final model that we can sculpt. We can soften the shapes a little bit here. We could have perhaps subdivided the objects into some parts a little more before generating. Also, we could have generated more meshes for different poses, or proportions. You can see how in the manual, in video on the channel. And well, that's a bit of the Block Surfaces addon. As you have seen, in the end, we have always used the same tools, very few. The addon has many more things that we can use to improve our workflow. But to begin with, we have been able to do many things, after making a simple character, and we can learn functions of the addon that allow us to make characters faster and more complex. The addon has many tools, but if you learn these basics, you will be able to do many things. Then you can always review the videos of the manual on the YouTube channel and learn the rest of the options it has. There, we can see each option of all the panels, and you also have the email to ask any questions, any doubts you have. I hope you liked it. I'm going to leave you this scene with the references so you can practice with this character, in the downloads of the addon. And as always, thank you very much for your support.